I'm good to go. Yeah, I definitely am not a graphic designer. I am definitely 100% a producer. So be prepared for some real hectic stuff. So thank you so much for coming along to my talk. What to expect when you're expecting. I had another image that I did that got vetoed by some very wise friends of mine because they said it was very offensive. So I might post it again one day, but it was effectively me as a child in the womb. So just imagine that, and that's what I actually originally had done, but I didn't do it. Ooh, let's see if these slides work. I would also first like to acknowledge that we are gathered here today on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I would like to acknowledge any elders with us today, past, present or emerging, and any other elders from other communities. So, if you do not know who I am, my name is Lisy Kane. Oh, that was very presumptuous, I'm really sorry. I'm the lead producer at a studio in Melbourne called League of Geeks, and we're based just a 15-minute, actually timed at 17-minute walk down the road at a place called The Arcade, which is a co-working space specifically for game developers. And I'm going to talk to you today about what production can do for you and your team. And if you didn't know as well, our debut title was a game called Armello. It was released in 2015 and it was quickly turned into games as a service. So we had to learn a lot about production methodologies very early on. I won't be talking about Armello which is very liberating, very exciting. I won't be talking about games as a service or Armello today, but I will make a plug. I'm going to be making lots of plugs today for different people because there are a lot of resources that you can digest out on the internet. And my GDC talk, Cooking with Gas, another great pun-filled talk, is available on the GDC Vault for free. I've got links at the end of the talk, so you'll be able to take photos to get those direct links there. This is a photo, trip down memory lane for anyone that does work at League of Geeks that is here today. This is a photo, we didn't have a new photo, unfortunately. We did desperately try to get a photographer to come in, but alas time. So this is 2 years ago now, I think, and we're about 15 people at that time, League of Geeks, and now we're 27, about to add a few more offers, and we're still growing. So potentially by the end of the year, we'll be 30, with room to grow from there. A bit of a background about me, firstly, to start with. So for those who don't know, I actually started my career in finance. So I was an executive assistant for many years up at a big bank up in Queensland. And I didn't really know at the time, but I was actually already a producer in training from a lot of the skills that I had to do there, as you can imagine, as a personal assistant. I then started League of Geeks in 2015 as an associate producer / community manager and was promoted to producer after releasing Armello. Obviously, you have to go through a lot through shipping a product, so after that I was given a promotion. And then last year I was transformed into my final, latest and greatest form, lead producer. So this is, I'll credit my artist, and this was Woody. Unfortunately, I tried to find the original file because it's super pixelated, but he did not save the Photoshop file. So our archival system for memes, unfortunately, is not great. And it also looks like I'm Shelley's body, I'm on Shelley's body, which is very, very important. I love talking about production. And I love learning all different types of things about production, building teams, and getting stuff done. So that's a big reason why I'm here today. Alongside what I've learned on the job, I've also had the incredible privilege to have learned about production and travelled the world and visited studios like Media Molecule, Obsidian, and Criterion. So that's where I've gathered a lot of my AAA experience. I've had, so through Film Victoria, I had a fellowship where I actually spent a month at Obsidian and a month at Media Molecule shadowing their production team. Outside of that, we have great friends at Criterion, and I've spent a day with them asking them heaps of questions and picking their brains. I've also spoken about production and games as a service at DICE Summit in 2017, and as I said, GDC this year. So let's move on to what we're going to be looking at today. I think it's really, really exciting that over the last few years, more and more indies, thank you so much. I like the smattering of like people reading the meme. That's from Facebook, which I feel really gross about, like getting a meme from Facebook in this year, 2019, but that's okay. I love that there are a lot of studios, especially small independent studios here in Australia as well as New Zealand, starting to recognise the value of producers. But it isn't a skill set that you necessarily get taught at university. There are a lot of soft skills that you don't get taught at university. Sure, you can get I don't know how to say this word, accreditation, yes, communication. In project management and Scrum, I've definitely practiced this talk, but I just stumbled on that word. Project management or Scrum mastery, but they're just usually like small certs and stuff, and I personally haven't done any of those, so I'm not qualified. I'm not a qualified project manager as far as universities are concerned. Production has also been a lot of the time taken on by people that have been experienced in game development, but then also have the soft skills to take those on. So what I'm going to talk about today is, firstly, we're going to have a look at what production looks like at League of Geeks at a very high level. We're then going to have a look at what production can do for you and your team. There are a lot of conversations that happen around hiring producers on Twitter and everything like that, but I think there are a lot of blurred lines when it comes to skill sets and experiences. And an interesting question to pose when we get to this section is to think about the idea, can you have a part-time producer? I'm not going to answer that question right now. And next up, we'll talk about what your team needs, so having a look at and identifying what you actually need as a team. And then also, finally, what makes me happy? Not me personally, the royal we. So producers happy. What makes producers happy? And I hope that you can take away and understand how a producer can fit into your team, what kind of producer you could be if you are a producer that is here today, and finally, how to actually onboard and develop a producer into your team. I'm going to allow a bit more time than normal for questions because I think this is such a broad topic. I would love to hear from some specific things, and I'm also going to bribe you with, Darcy will appreciate this, League of Geeks pins, everybody. Yes, wow, yes. So if you ask a question, I will give you a pin. Please ask questions. So get them all in your brain and we'll answer them at the end. So very broadly, let's start off with what is a producer? I spoke at GCAP last year on a panel with Amy Dallas, and the topic of what a producer is came up. And I have a really good anecdote that I think will be good to start off this talk today. It was by Joe Park, who is the COO over at Harmonious Productions, and this has always stuck with me, and I keep telling people whenever I talk about production. A producer is like a referee. You only notice them when they make a bad call. So you can take that credit, Joe. It was very, very wise. Everyone was like, ah, yes. So let's start off with what production life is like at League of Geeks. I will say that this is something that we've established over the last 5 years, and that we've also established this from working on our Mellow, obviously for many, many years, but then also acknowledging that we have a much bigger project that we're working on right now. So it's an unannounced IP. So we've had to build structures and processes from what we've learned on our Mellow to accommodate for this new project. This new project will have us growing to around 40 to 50 people just for that project as well. So a lot of that is taken into consideration. For now, we are a two project studio, like I mentioned before, just around 30 people. So how do we actually get things done? I think this is going to be really blurry. That's okay, that's not too bad. As a quick overview of how League of Geeks works, and so this is going to help frame why we've created this production team. As a company, we strive to build world-class games with empowered teams. We also are aiming to hit the 3 C's, so critical, cultural, and commercial success. So as a production department, we aim to give the teams the amount of support they need to do in order to make this happen. leagueofgeeks.com/careers. Check it out. This is where it's from. So let's have a look at how our production team is structured. I have not tested this, so hopefully it's funny. So first at the top, I've also not told them that I'm using their Slack emotes. So I should have probably checked that. First up, we have our fearless leader, Trent Custers. He is the co-founder of League of Geeks, game runner on our new project, and production director for the company. So you'll notice here I've called out founder and game runner. So within our company, some of our people have multiple roles. They have a role for the company and then roles for projects. Every year we take a look at this and we restructure it. At the moment, this is what suits the two-project studio model. We may eventually get to the point that we have to change it as we become a one-project studio, but for now, this is what it looks like. So production director for the company, founder, obviously inherently because he is a founder, and then game runner specifically on projects. Next up is me. I'm the I didn't expect a laugh there. Lead producer for the company and executive producer on this new project. So once again, I have two roles. Lead for us is seniority, but also leadership in regards to mentoring team members. Next, we have Woody. Producer for the past year. He's been executive producer on Armello, and he will be supporting and joining me on this next project actually next week, which is very exciting. As well as this, we have our brilliant QA team. So QA actually sits within production, and we've decided to do that because we have very, very similar and shared goals. And that is obviously around making sure that our builds are stable and understanding scheduling and being able to be a resource to us to know how we're releasing builds. We decided to include QA very, very early on. This may change. We think the only time that it will change is if the QA team outgrows us and moves out of home and then finds their own place. But for now, it's just, we have two full-time. Jonathan, I love that photo so much. And Stacey is the bug. Stacey doesn't have a emote on Slack yet, so unfortunately, so I gave him the bug emote, which I think is very fair. We're also onboarding another producer in the upcoming weeks, which is very exciting. That's an internal hire. Elena is BI on Armello, but is going to be a shared role between our new project and Armello, just because I need help really badly. And this will be our production team up until our next project launches. So one of the things that we've aimed to do, and I've spoken to a bunch of people around this, and the consensus is generally one producer for every 10 people on your team, and that's what we're aiming for. So what I thought I'd do to kick off and continue League of Geeks production is actually share with you what's on my contract, because I think that's, yeah, take photos. I'm more than happy. I've asked for permission and definitely got approval for this. Olga's here too, so that's very funny. But I asked Trent for permission. Trent said yes. So this is actually my position description, what's signed off in my contract, what I do on a day-to-day basis, what I'm kept to when I get yearly reviews and all that kind of stuff. It's fairly standard, like a fairly standard production responsibilities list, but it's something that we've developed over the years. So obviously it includes things like project requirements and milestones, anticipating blockers, scope changes, and mainly just communication. Just communication above all is something that's incredibly important, especially as we grow from, I was the 8th employee to now that, yeah, we're just under 30. So communication, if anyone's seen the communication web, it just becomes more and more exponentially difficult as you bring more people on. And also, just for transparency, I thought I'd also share with you my responsibilities as a lead. So this is fairly consistent across our whole leadership team. So not only am I expected to be a producer day-to-day, I'm also expected to be a lead for my team. So that is obviously mentoring and supporting my team, making sure that they have everything they need, and also to be there for their one-on-ones and everything like that. So now that you've met us, met our team, hello, let's break down exactly what production can do for you. I will preface that these are very idealistic goals, and we don't stick to all of these 100%, because I understand, especially in indie studios, we are hamstrung by, we have to be very, very resourceful. And that's about who we hire, when we hire, and what roles that they will hold. I'll be talking in goals specifically for teams and producers, for you to aim towards, have the most effective and healthy ways of growing and motivating producers. Once again, I've taken this from both AAA and indie world, all the kind of things that I've seen in the industry. So there are heaps of different roles. There are like so many. These are just a limited amount that I thought that would make the most sense to share. Obviously, they all have very different specific goals. I'll be obviously honing on the most broad ones. Happy to have chats about some of the more specific ones. Oh, no. Ooh. Hello. Oh, cool. That's exactly where I was. Voila! Ooh, yay! So, technical producer. A technical producer I looked up, it's horrifying. I don't know if has anyone looked up technical production, but you need to know how to code and maintain Jira and all that stuff. I outsourced that, so yes. So let's start off with executive producer, AKA me. Oh no, where'd my mouse go? Is my mouse over there? Oh no. What, did I do that? What is happening? Am I doing something? Yeah. Oh, good. I was like, is this a sign? Have I done something wrong? I don't know. Sure. Thank you. So this role specifically generally applies for, because I keep seeing this thing move and I'm assuming something's happening. So this particular role applies to larger scale projects, generally that have some type of investment or publisher involved, and they go above what a standard producer generally does. And they're often linked to projects. So for example, you would potentially have an executive producer on a project versus the company, but it could apply to both as well, but it makes sense to have it more for the project. They're generally expected to mentor and support other producers of all different levels, so not just juniors, so for people that are potentially just a few years below them as well. And they're expected to maintain relationships, especially those external to the company, so external stakeholders, as well as those internal. They often can be the person that's the one voice between you and that external publisher, investor, making sure that you only have one person coming out of the company to talk things production. Because otherwise, sometimes a lot of miscommunications can come from, someone's DMing the investor as well as the producer and then them not understanding the clear message that's coming through. Above all, they're responsible for making sure a project comes under budget and on time. When I presented this to Trent, I had to edit it because I said on budget and on time, and he said, no, under budget. And I was like, I didn't, do I really? Okay, well, anyway, I won't be diving more into how to do these specific skills because I think we would be here all day, but I highly recommend, there's a talk today at 4:30 p.m. called More Cards Against People Mismanagement by Emily Poissonneau, also from League of Geeks. But her talk series around people management and communication really directly links to a lot of the stuff that an executive producer and producer should be expected to do. So highly recommend you check out that talk. And someone's slacking me, which is very funny. I'm going to quit Slack. Whoops. Next up, we have producers, which is obviously the most common, once again, so sorry for these really boring slides. This is the most common role and can be required regardless of having any kind of external stakeholder. If you have an executive producer, you may expect they manage budgets, but also producers can be expected to manage those as well. In some situations, you may not have an executive producer specifically, but you may have someone like a founder or a game director that is managing the budgets, but make sure that's extremely clear, because as soon as it becomes unclear, a producer doesn't know what they're actually responsible for. I would also expect a producer to have experience in shipping at least one commercial title. And this can be anything. This can be a free-to-play game. It can be something that's available for purchase in the App Store. It can be a mobile game. This is to prove that they can execute and they can release something. A caveat to this, though, would be if they were a traditional project manager or someone from, say, the tech world or from a startup. I would also be looking at what they've done in that. If it wasn't a game specifically, they may have had some kind of project that's completed that they could talk to, for example, in an interview. So I'd be looking for what they can execute on. And finally is the associate producer. So the associate producer isn't necessarily a junior, but can be a junior. But the word associate means that they are there to support their production team. So they'll be expected to do a lot of those tasks that were done earlier on, so similar to the producer or executive producer, but more in a supporting way. I'd like to say that they should be expected to execute on those tasks and those skill sets, but they shouldn't be held accountable for those specific skill sets. Because they don't have the same level of experience, they've been hired as an associate producer, you would expect that they also potentially haven't released anything as well, which is totally fine. Once again, talking through ways that they have executed or finished a project would be really important. They should definitely have mentoring and support from their team in order to have some kind of career path to go from associate producer to producer. And I'll use an example here of when I was an associate producer and talking about that support. So on Armello, in 2015 it released, I'd been at the company for less than a year, and I had made a $100,000 US mistake, like a huge fuck up, like massive, massive mistake. I learned from this to the point that I'm obviously still talking about it. Basically, I just didn't get builds ready in time for, this is really embarrassing, I didn't get builds ready in time for the press. So a lot of our press didn't have builds. And when you release a game, you need builds to review. I don't know if you know this, Darcy, but yeah, you don't. But yeah, I didn't get the builds ready, so Trent didn't have them to show to the press in time, which meant we had to show an older version of the game, which was fine, but also it did cause us a lot of, we lost a lot of opportunities for press, which we can quantify, and we did quantify into $100,000. At the end of the day, however, Trent at that stage, he wasn't the executive producer on paper, but he effectively was. He did not hold me accountable for this. He absorbed all that accountability when it came down to like the questions on what happened and what went wrong. Because I'd been there less than a year, I wasn't expected to know everything, make sure everything was on time, especially with the pressure on top of that of having a release. At the end of the day, the game did come out. Sure, we may have missed some opportunities, but we're still here today talking about Armello, so in hindsight, at least I have something to talk about. But I definitely learned from it. I would have learned just as much if I'd been reprimanded for it or like given like negative reviews over it, but it wasn't something that I took lightly personally, which most people, when they know they've made a mistake, they're never gonna like go, oh yeah, that's all good. But not being reprimanded meant that I knew that I had the ability to make mistakes and the ability to be a real person and forget things from time to time. I've never forgotten anything ever since though. Some bonus points, as I mentioned, studios, especially in Australia, they have the impossible task of having not enough funding to hire people to do all the things that you need to do. So production is obviously often required to fill those gaps, especially around soft skills. So there's a variety of different areas that they can cover things. So studio culture, so improving and being the eyes and ears of the studio. Obviously, we're generally a cross-discipline, so that makes a lot of sense to me. We can be expected to do administration. I still manage admin at League of Geeks. Please don't email it. I have like so many emails in there that I haven't replied to yet. But generally, like that's something that we have to be part of. Operations, so other projects, organising shows and conventions, getting to PAX, probably a producer organised that all. And also, HR and recruiting, which is something that I'm not skilled in or qualified for, but it was something that I had to do for a year. Luckily, I hired a studio manager, so they're now looking after that because I constantly was like, is this ethical? Am I allowed to do this? I don't know what's going on because I don't have the training for it. Some people have actual skills to do those things. It is super important that you know that if you've got these skills that you know that you will need your producers to do, that it is part of the job description or position description so that they know that they're going to expect to be doing those tasks and potentially so they can talk to them in their interview and show you that they've done them before. It'd be interesting to even figure out these bonus points versus the actual skills before, what percentage that your producer would be expected to do those things. Are they actually going to be expected to do 50% administration and then 50% scheduling? Because that may be a different role type, that might be something different altogether. So when thinking about production and what it can do for you and your team, I often think about it as a force multiplier, which is actually a military term, which I didn't know. But a force multiplier is basically allowing you and your team, one person, to influence and encourage a lot more people on the team. So when bringing on a producer, it's good to run the simulation, as we say at Log a lot, on how bringing this person on will allow you and your team to effectively do better things than they did before. So for example, the producer is one person can potentially improve and affect the outcomes of 2 or 3 or 4 people's work, which is what a force multiplier is. So thinking about it from the perspective of what your team actually needs, we're excellent problem solvers who love to get those tricky questions and with limitless solutions. If you need someone to come in to be purely production and unblock blockers schedule and plan your milestones, your team then can become unblocked and they can move through tasks more effectively. If you need someone to help provide a roadmap of your work, they can then understand where they're going and have more energy to focus on their tasks at hand. A note on this around roadmaps and communication, there is an excellent GDC talk, which I've got a link for at the end, called the Games Outcome Project. And it was a big study that was done in the US, and it covers a bunch of different AAA games, their Metacritic scores versus did they crunch. And spoiler alert, they don't match. Just because you crunch doesn't mean you get a better Metacritic score. One thing they do top cover off is that having a clear and well-documented development plan is a major reason for ensuring that crunch is less likely to occur. I had to double check my notes in case I said crunch will occur if you have a good plan. Because basically, effectively, if your team knows what they're working on and working towards, they then don't have to make up and second guess themselves and potentially go in the wrong direction, which obviously will then doubling up on work, blowing out scope, having sad, burnt out people, and that's not what you want for your team. Well, that's not what we want for our team. Some people, I think, want that. Another thing to think of and consider when hiring a producer is that effectively we are leads without the title. Obviously, I have the title lead because I've been promoted to that position. But Woody, as an example, he's a producer, but he's expected to have very similar characteristics to a leader, but doesn't have that title. Our skills require us to run emotional gymnastics with a diverse range of communicators on a daily basis to consolidate information and problems to keep that boat afloat. So effectively, very much a leader. We have high levels of accountability across the team, so we're expected to actually action things and see things through to the end. Even at the associate producer level, while they're not obviously accountable, they are still part of that journey. So, why have you actually decided to get a producer? Let's do what I call root cause analysis, which is looking obviously at what the actual trigger was to get to the point of choosing to hire a producer. It may be you have a project deadline. So for example, you have PAX coming up and you can't miss that date because you need to have a build to showcase. You want someone to come in and be accountable for you not missing that date. You also may feel disorganized and want someone to just come in and check on you and make sure that you're okay and that you're on the right track and just be someone else to support you on that journey, especially if you're trying to actually be in the tools and make the game. And then finally, you might just be looking around and seeing and modeling your studio off other studios and see they have a producer and be like, I think I need a producer because that team has a producer. So, I think that's a very valid reason. There's so many studios around that are great to model off if they've got similar product cycles and release cycles that they may have an advantage because they have a producer on their team. Because Trent is very busy and very good at giving feedback, but they're not following up sometimes on things. He was going to give me a link to a study, but I'm going to just tell you the anecdote of this particular study, and I can't find the link to it. It's really upsetting. So Indie Mega Booth over in the US, a university called Concordia, I hope it's Concordia, they did a study looking at all the teams on Indie Mega Booth, similar to PAX Rising, similar to PAX, I don't know if you have a similar booth, but basically for studios that are smaller independent studios that are looking to release a game or have just released their game, they can showcase their games at Indie Mega Booth. And they're generally really good quality and really interesting and unique. And one of the common things they surveyed is they all had producers. The teams that had producers, were more likely to release on time and have a happier and healthier team. But the caveat to that was that they needed to be at least a team size of 10. So generally when they hit that team size of 10, that's when they're looking to onboard a producer. So I was the 8th hire and I was only an associate producer at that time. It's obviously going to be very different for every single team, especially if on our next exercise, which we're about to look at, it doesn't quite add up. If I find it, I'll tweet it. I don't know where it is. Trent's like, I'll send it to you. I was like, cool. So another Trent Custism is a thing called the perfect day. This is a really great way of you figuring out if you need a producer, what type of producer you need, or is it something else? What is your perfect day? Do you come into the studio in the morning, put your headphones on, and just do some cool stuff? Just like make code, do art, make things happen. Is that what you do? Is that your perfect day? Have a lunch break, obviously, and then go back to making things. Is your perfect day checking in with the team, doing emails? No, that's no one's perfect day. Speaking to press, looking at schedules, or is it actually a combination of those two things? So for example, you may want to be involved in the team, but also want to have the time to actually do the code, do the art. This is something that we run all the time at League of Geeks. I think we do it at least once a year, especially the higher they get. So at the founder level and the lead level, it's really, really important because as a company, we actually want our team to be able to do what they want to do as best as we can allow for. And some people, they get to the point where they've done leadership for a little while and they're actually like, I just want to make stuff. I just want to build things. And that's okay. We just need to obviously plan around that. So we often get people to run this perfect day scenario so we can figure out how we need to support them better, or do we need to hire someone to replace specific areas, or do we just need to automate it in some other way? So once you've understood that you need a producer, look at crafting a job description that would encapsulate everything that you feel they'd be responsible for. So use that perfect day exercise, use the position descriptions that I mentioned before, but does it also include things like thinking about studio management, recruitment, scheduling, team cheerleader? It's not a studio mum. I will repeat, I'm not here to be anyone's mother at any time, no way. So that's not what we're here for. So if you're looking for someone to like actually take care of the team in an emotional way, there are definitely other skills and other resources out there you can get for that. So here's an example of my day and what I do every day. So if you're thinking about hiring a producer, this is another good exercise to run as a perfect day for your studio. So, sorry, perfect day for your producer. What was that?
Why aren't we in the fun meeting?
Actually, it is a really fun meeting. It's redacted. It's like some stuff is in there I like obviously made up. It is a really fun meeting. You'll probably know what that is, but this is my perfect week, right? Because obviously as a producer, I also have a lot of deep tasks and things that I need to do. Any of these can be like planning future meetings, so outside of the meeting, reviewing states of the milestones, solving big problems, assisting with onboarding team members, and communicating with the team in general. That's the stuff that's kind of outside of those meetings. Monday is definitely our busiest day, so we go Monday, Wednesday, Friday are our meeting days, and Tuesday and Thursday are focus days. So that's across the studio, to the point that even some of the folk actually mark themselves like out of office on Tuesday and Thursday, so you actually can't book meetings with them, which reminds me that I shouldn't be booking meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. This comes down to that perfect day thing. It's around the fact that we need days to focus and do tasks. But funnily enough, this is actually what my weeks generally look like. It ends up becoming a huge onslaught of new meetings, and so very little time to actually sit down and do work. There's sometimes days where, and other folks at League of Geeks can relate, that I actually don't get any time to sit at my desk, which is a huge problem and something that we're trying to solve at the moment. I don't know how to solve that, but we'll get there eventually. Now that you have a producer and everything's awesome and you're like, this person's going to change my life, how do you actually make them feel welcome? And how do you actually make them feel empowered, which will ultimately have them being that force multiplier that I mentioned before, so they can be efficient and effective for your team? Often being a producer is a very thankless task. I'm sure a lot of producers that are here, or even other people that are in, I guess, like soft skill related work would be able to relate to. A lot of the time we can feel our work is unseen and unvalued. Other than looking at spreadsheets or looking at the fact that we've done a release, it's hard to actually see the work we do. Imagine if you're an artist and no one on the team saw your artwork until release day. Or if you were checking in features and they were never celebrated or ever reviewed. That does happen sometimes, but keep with me on this scenario. Producers, we want to know that we are doing a good job and that we're on the right track. I was going to talk about being an A-type personality, but I don't know if that's everyone or if it's just me. So, but yeah, there's a lot of people that, we want to make sure that we're doing our job right. And we do hit lots of bouts of feeling super overwhelmed and that we're lacking direction. That's a point in time where luckily for me, I have people to talk to in my team, but I know some people don't have that. And we also know the feeling, this is probably unanimous across all game development, there is not enough hours in the day most of the time. So how to make me happy? This is our third day of Global Game Jam a few years ago, so that's why I look like that. So let's start with friends. Please don't leave me alone. You need to make sure your producer has one or more buddies. This can be a founder, a game director, someone to bounce off ideas and contextualize. During my years as an associate producer, till now, I still have people on my team that I can bounce ideas off and validate my decisions. Obviously, over the years, it has become easier and I do have to check in less because obviously with experience, you're able to take those training wheels off. But in the beginning, I've got the founders on our team plus a few other members that have shipped 50 plus games between them all. Make sure you have a team around you that supports you. So don't leave me alone, please. Secondly, set pillars for your producer to help them understand what the expectations are on the team. Above and beyond what that position description is going to be, because obviously when you start, there's going to be some changes. And when you realize this particular person's more experienced in another area, you may want them to do different things than you originally had advertised for. So setting department pillars, even if it's only one producer, is incredibly a good way to set that framework. So for example, ours is quality, time, team, and budget. And we know that changes over time, so sometimes they're not always even, but they're our pillars that we always aim for. We're not mind readers as well, sorry. So please keep us clearly communicated and let us know what you actually need and what your team is after. This can also include doing exercises like setting SMART goals. So actually sitting down when you onboard your producer and giving them a 6-month trajectory of where you think they should go. And you could actually do that with any team member. It's something that we do as part of our onboarding process at Log, is we set SMART goals in the first week. And they can be as simple as make sure I get to know everyone on the team. Thirdly, I love getting quick, small problems that I can fix. The reason being is some of the problems we have to fix take me weeks to solve. So in the meantime, I think sometimes because we always say, oh, we're really busy, that people don't come and ask questions. If you come up and ask me, can I get a cool pen? Which Darcy does every 3 months. I actually say no, why do you need this pen? And I actually go through a question and answer. And then I feel like I've done something successful. And that is save the money, potentially $20 on another cool pen because he lost the last one, which has happened twice now. Another thing, also bonus point for that, please say thank you. I did a tweet recently around producers out there, what are things that motivate you or make you happy? And most of them said being thanked. I was like, oh. So thank you to all my producers out there for answering that tweet. Producers often have to self-prioritize as well. So feedback and communication helps us prioritize. Don't test us. Don't go, I'm hiring this producer, they're going to solve everything, let's see how they go. That's not okay. That's for anyone that you're hiring. Give them the information that they need. Even if it's as simple as, hey, I worked with a producer before, this is how I like being communicated with, or I've worked with a producer before and I hated it when they did this, and I'm sure it was. I hated it when they told me I had to do my work faster. But it's good for us to understand, to contextualize our style. And finally, because I've got the little 10-minute mark, this is the slide with all the links on it, so make sure you take photos of it. So we have my GDC talk, which I made this little tiny URL thing, Lisy GDC. The Games Outcome Project, which is the GDC talk. There's also a Gama Sutra article which relates to that as well. Really, really awesome. Thirdly, there's a GDC talk called Autonomy, Mastery and Purpose. I didn't have time to talk about it today, but this is a GDC talk. I love, one of my personal professional developments outside of audiobooks is to play WoW and watch GDC talks on the side. The thing there and playing it, it's really, really fun. And one thing last year when we were going into this pre-production for our new project is I knew we needed to find a new production methodology. And this was literally the first talk I watched, and it is incredible, by Alex Moll at Criterion. and that's how I became pen pals with him because I just started emailing him and asking him questions. Highly recommend it. I don't think I have time to talk about retros because I want to see if anyone has any questions. But retros are really good. They can suck a lot, but they help you prioritize and know that you're on the right track. I'm really sorry. They feel like a production dunking session to begin with. Like, oh, we didn't get this done. Like, yeah. But once you've done it a few times, you'll actually start to see the lists get smaller and the actions get more targeted. And then you realize, oh, actually, we did this. You know what? They may not thank you for it, but you realize that you've improved processes to make the retro more effective. To summarize and wrap up, I think we have less time than I thought we would. Finding and advertising, make sure you find and advertise for the correct type of producer and make sure you're advertising for the correct type of role. Understand how they'll support and fit in your team before you even bring them on board. And make sure you give them the resources in order to succeed. On top of this, make sure you check in with them. So even just asking them how they're going, because most likely they'll be like, oh, please help me, which is often what happens at League of Geeks quite a lot. And also make sure that you have your pillars set so they understand what they're going towards. So I'm gonna shoot to questions. These are all my details. This is leagueofgeeks.com/careers because we are hiring always and forever. Unfortunately, we're not hiring any producers, so this is probably the wrong audience. But if you're an engineer or a senior technical designer, please reach out to us. I'll also be hanging around outside if we run out of time for questions because I think I have 5 minutes. Thank you. I went so quick. I was like, yeah. Questions? Yeah. Hi.
What advice do you have for students/postgraduates that aspire to be a producer?
Mm-hmm.
They're a bit anxious, so like, I just graduated, I can't walk into a studio and be like, hey, I want to be a producer. What advice do you have for those people?
Like I was saying before during my talk, that is a really tough thing. It's really interesting. I don't know who I was talking to this about, but I find it very interesting that a lot of studios with such a critical role like producers are hiring people straight out of university. It actually is happening quite a lot because it is a soft skill, because we're looking for obviously other skill sets as well. There are a lot of people that are taking risks on juniors because university is really hard too. Like finishing a uni degree is actually super, super difficult. I hated university, so definitely really, really hard. Build a portfolio around things that you've done, regardless of if it's actually production. So when I applied to work at League of Geeks, I was doing advertising at that point in time, so I showed them content that I'd created, I'd show them articles that I'd written online, I showed them basically anything that could show that I finished something from beginning to end. And then I also gave them, so for advertising specifically, it was easier, I gave them my planning and my thought process, because they want to know how you're thinking and how you get from like A to B. So looking at building, because you can build a portfolio as a producer, even though it takes a little bit more creativity and awesome slides, but look at doing that and figuring out what do you do in your day-to-day. As an example, when I was a personal assistant, I was like, oh, these things are all essentially what a producer could be. So looking at your skill sets and what you do in your job, your part-time job or casual job, and how it can apply to a producer. And also just read position descriptions, regardless if you're going to apply for it, and see what people are looking for and be like, cool, I'm going to go volunteer at GCAP and do that and put that on my resume and know that I've done that, and people that work at GCAP may recommend me for jobs as well. That's more broadly networking, but yes.
Could I get you to talk us through perhaps a bit of a delineation between the technical skills versus the soft skills that are involved in being a producer?
Mm-hmm. Technical skills. Like technically they are skills, but so I guess technical skills I think can be learned by a lot of different people, but the technical skills that I have are really mainly about spreadsheets and Jira is like, there are a lot of JQL if you learn how to use Jira effectively, if the team you're working with does use Jira, but more and more studios are starting to use it because they have a lot more inexpensive versions available now. They used to be super unaffordable, but they're now more affordable. Looking at things like how to actually show things off in a spreadsheet. There's the whole, obviously, well, yeah, we love spreadsheets, but actually being able to communicate something from scratch on a spreadsheet is very, like, I think of quite a technical skill. So the whole blank page scenario of going, oh, I need to start a brand new report from scratch. A lot of the things I do is communication, so actually honing my technical communication skills in regards to, I want to make sure I know I want this outcome. How do I get to this point? So what are the things that I need to prove that? And that can be mainly written documentation for us. We do a lot of like business reports and all that kind of stuff. So learning how to do that is super important. I don't know, outside of that. Spreadsheets.
Please put your hand up very high.
I'm so sorry. Oh, damn it. Oh, yeah, shit. I was going to throw them at people. This lady at the back, yeah. Hi, sorry. Yes,
Hey, when onboarding a new producer, what's some key information about your project that they would find very
You're trying to get project information on me?
No,
Okay,
no,
cool.
no, non-specific stuff.
Yeah,
I've
so
got a job.
we actually have our amazing designer Emily, who is talking at 4:30 today. Everyone should go to her talk. We actually have a project overview page that we have, and it's this very, very high level. The history of the project, the really high level like game design structures that they should understand first, as well as things like mood boards and Spotify playlists to understand the project, because I think that's really important and part of it. And then more importantly, understanding what roles everyone have in the teams, what production methodologies we use, and then making sure they also understand who we're making the game for. So we actually have, Emily did a great talk at NZGDC about this, but she actually, her design methodology is actually to firstly set who we're making the game for, specifically down to we name them, we give them a photo, and we actually say who the game is for. So if you know who that game is for, a lot of the time you'll be that person to be like, are you sure that we're on the right track with this particular area? So I think that's also really important to give them. You should talk to Emily, she's really great at this stuff, yeah.
We've got a couple more minutes, so Lisy, would you like to pick?
No!
It's hard for me
I'm
to.
going to pick you because I don't think we've met before. Everyone else, we can talk outside afterwards, but... Ooh.
So my question to you, more asking for advice, I suppose. I'm currently in university as a student doing my final project.
Yeah.
How do I convince my group we need a producer? Because they are adamant we don't, and I'm adamant we do.
How many people are in that team?
We have 5 internal and then 4 contractors.
You need a producer. There's so many people.
Yeah.
Like literally, like the average for game studios. I think EA does it. Like a bunch of other studios, it's 1 to 10. 100%. If you have 10 people, show them the communication map thing. That nodule. There's like a graph of spiderweb. It's like called the communication web, I think it is. That, and also I think is it you that wants to be the producer?
I do want to be the
Just
producer.
be the producer. I had it on there. I think I deleted it, but one of my other resources is ask for forgiveness. Don't ask for permission. Just do it. Just do it, because if they're going to be more organized and deliver it on time, I don't think they're going to complain about that. So I would just do it.
Good advice, thank
Just
you.
build a trolley board and show them how cool it can be. Yeah. Yeah. Oh no. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.